All right, you got a report revealing Christian persecution at an all-time high. Get this, every month, 322 Christians are murdered because they're Christians, and 214 churches destroyed because they're Christian churches by ISIS and other terror groups. Just add them all together. But in the face of evil, we're learning of incredible stories of holding on to your faith. The brand new book out now chronicles all this. It calls the Martyr's Oath. Living for the Jesus they're willing to die for. Has firsthand stories about that. I'm talking about Johnny Moore, who's always go to some of the worst places around, Johnny, and trying to help those who are really under siege. First off, tell me some of the places you've been and what you've witnessed.
Yeah, well, I mean, the statistics are staggering, right? I mean, we've now lost 80% of the Christians in Iraq. We've lost 50% in Syria. You know, in a generation and a half, we've lost 99% of the Christians in Turkey. You know, in Egypt right now, we're seeing a massive escalation of Christian persecution. So I went documenting all of these statistics and stories and, you know, what exactly is happening. But I also went looking for stories of hope and perseverance in the face of all of this, because you know, the terrorists are trying to destroy Christianity, and in the end, all they're doing is they're actually making us stronger.
Give me an example.
Well, you know, just in Egypt, you know, in the last couple of months, I mean, you know, ISIS has moved into the Sinai. I mean, they moved out 200 families from the northern Sinai. They bombed dozens and dozens of churches. They attacked a whole busload of Christians going to a monastery. 2 days ago, you know, they knifed to death a priest in the streets, and yet the churches are still filled. You know, on Good Friday, they killed dozens of Christians, and yet on Easter Sunday, you know, you couldn't put another Christian in a church in Egypt because the Christians refuse to be terrorized. They just won't be intimidated. And so it's the best of times and the worst of times.
And also when it came to refugees, they weren't prioritized over the last 8 years before President Trump took office. What was that like? Because you were actually trying to help them.
Yeah, and, you know, the Obama administration, frankly, didn't care at all. I mean, they literally didn't care at all. They blocked us from bringing a nun to testify to Congress about the atrocities she witnessed in Iraq. But not the case with President Trump. I mean, you know, President Trump and the Trump administration care about this issue entirely. And, you know, the truth is, you know, Trump is on the path to solve the Syrian crisis, to solve the North Korean crisis, potentially. You know, North Korea is the #1 persecutor of Christians.
Even though Hillary Clinton was in South Korea criticizing our sitting president, which is unbelievable.
Insane. I mean, you know, Kim Jong-un and his father and grandfather have built their dictatorship on the backs and blood of Christians. There's 70,000 Christians in prison right now. I mean, imagine if Trump solves the Syrian crisis, solves North Korea, and then very easily he could save Christianity in the Middle East. If you know, a simple presidential directive, you know, ordering aid to help rebuild the Christian communities, you know, a coordinator to make sure it all gets done. I mean, he could end up with the Nobel Peace Prize.
But meanwhile, you said that the door is always open to the White House, to the evangelical community. It's even today. The name of the book is The Martyr's Oath, Living for the Jesus They're Willing to Die for. Johnny Moore doesn't just write about it. He lives it, sees it, and then chronicles it. Johnny, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Very brave guy.